The U.S. says its biggest aircraft carrier strike group has now entered the Caribbean Sea. The U.S. Navy making that announcement a short time ago. The USS Gerald Ford is set to join major military exercises that are scheduled to begin today off the coast of Venezuela. The U.S. has already put more than a dozen warships and 15,000 troops in the region as tensions with Venezuela continue to rise.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. Donald Trump, during his campaign, promised to be America's peace president. We have now moved America's most powerful weapon system, a nuclear-powered and nuclear-equipped aircraft carrier, off the coast of Venezuela. The Trump administration is talking about regime change by force if necessary, and it continues to destroy alleged drug trafficking speedboats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, justifying it under the guise of targeting terrorists. Meanwhile, Congress is not being adequately briefed, and the American people, for all we know, are being marched into a war by a president desperate to distract us from his failures and his crimes. I met up with Congressman Jason Crow in his office in D.C. to discuss all this. He's a former Army Ranger. He sits on the House Intelligence and House Armed Services Committees, and he has been a leader amongst his colleagues in reasserting congressional powers when it comes to war making. The last time I spoke with Jason on the record in this office was for the Midas Studios film Against All Enemies, where he made a number of predictions about the abuse of power by the Trump regime. Those predictions have all come true. That's where our conversation starts. We also dive deep into the looming conflict with Venezuela. Here's me and Congressman Jason Crow.
Jason, it's hard to believe that the last time we were here in this office talking about the Oath Keepers and the threats to the Constitution during and after January 6th, you and I both made predictions that are now our new reality. And at the time, we were seen as alarmist for suggesting something like the Oath Keepers are going to get pardoned, or the president is going to deputize extremists, which is basically what ICE has become in order to intimidate Americans. And this is the America we live in now.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be wrong. Actually, never more in my life have I wanted to be wrong and to miscall something than what I said, years ago. But listen, if you're paying attention, if you've been paying attention to Trump since the beginning, you know that there's nothing that he won't do, either to exact vengeance on his opponents or to earn a buck.
Yeah.
That explains 90% of what the man does. Greed, make money, or punish people. And he has no limits. Which actually, and I mean, but that's why in my first term in Congress, I actually undertook the duty of prosecuting the first impeachment trial. Because I knew then, 5 years ago now, almost, the danger that he really posed.
The other animating principle of Trumpism, and it relates directly to the other two that you laid out, is distraction. When his wealth is being threatened or when he's in danger of being held to account, he has an almost animal instinct for elevating an issue or pressing the right buttons with the media or the American public to deflect attention.
Right.
And right now, we're seeing the massing of American military power in the Caribbean. We have seen I would argue, lawless strikes on, we're told they're drug runners, but no proof has been offered to the American people, much less Congress. And it feels like on the heels of the Epstein vote that this is a classic wag the dog.
Yeah.
You've spoken about this. You actually have a letter out there now and legislation in the works. How worried should we be?
Yeah, well, the danger is certainly increasing, and the wag the dog was exactly the phrase that I was thinking about when you were just describing that. Listen, this presidency is already 11 months in an abysmal failure, right? Businesses are closing, the tariffs are a disaster, ranchers and cattlemen and farmers are going under because of the tariffs. The world is increasingly volatile and unstable. His Ukraine policy is actually pretty generous. He doesn't really have any policies, right, to speak of. But his approach to Ukraine and national security is a disaster. So the worse this gets for him, in the elections just a couple of weeks ago showed that. The American people are moving fast away from Donald Trump because of the pain that he's inflicting on the American people and the way in which he's driving this government into the ground. So the more that happens, the more desperate he becomes. We know that he is somebody who is willing to use all of the powers of the government in the White House and as commander-in-chief to try to keep power, hold power, suppress dissent, and it's why we have to be very vigilant right now.
Hey everyone, quick break to tee up a trailer for a new show that I have been dying to tell you about. Chris Goldsmith, audience favorite here, is launching his own podcast. Enjoy.
This is On Offense, and I'm Chris Goldsmith, combat vet, anti-fascist investigator, and founder of Task Force Butler and Veterans Fighting Fascism. I've spent years infiltrating extremist movements, exposing fascist street gangs, and organizing other veterans to stand up for democracy. And now, we're living in a reality where those same far-right maniacs are getting embedded throughout our federal government. That's why I'm bringing my work here. Raw, direct, unfiltered. Every week on Offense, I'll break down what's happening behind the closed doors of hate groups, how extremist groups are getting closer to real political power, and what it's going to take to stop the next wave of political violence. You'll hear from organizers on the front lines and from veterans who know what real service to country looks like. On Offense is for anyone who's ready to fight for democracy. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to watch our videos, make sure you're following Valor Media Network on YouTube. America's in a fight for its future. Let's go on offense.
He has certainly mastered the art of getting the most out of executive power. Mm-hmm. And I would argue he's gone way beyond what is allowed by the Constitution.
Yeah.
But the Article 1 branch has done the opposite. How do you account for the branch in which you sit not exercising its authority at all when it comes to war powers, when it comes to tariffs? The legislative branch has been AWOL.
No, Republicans in Congress have been AWOL.
Thank you.
Right? Let's be clear what we're talking about here, right? Democrats and my colleagues are fighting like hell and are standing up to fight for their constituents, for their states, for their districts, for the Constitution in remarkable ways. This is a story about a failed political party that has been hijacked by one man that has turned its back on all of its principles, by the way. They can't say they're fiscally conservative. They can't say that they're pro-national security. They can't say anymore that they're pro-troops. They can't even say that they're pro-crime and public safety. All of those things are out the window because they've turned their back on all of their original principles, right? This is the story of a complete capitulation of a political party to one man. And, part of that, my personal evolution as a member of Congress, I like to think the best of people. I just don't want to go through life like assuming the worst in people, or like, in my initial interaction with somebody being like, oh, this person is bad until they prove me good. I like to do the opposite. I just want to assume people are good. So, I came here almost 7 years ago now, thinking that the vast majority of the people here were in it for the right reasons, for service, right? Because that's our service background, me and you. You assume that out of folks. What I've learned is that actually the majority of the people are here because they like the job and the title and the influence and the power, and they like to be somebody. And that's not everybody, because there are still some amazing people here, right? Amazing public servants, servant leaders. But there are more than I expected who are in it for personal power and influence. And what I learned is that those people will do anything to keep that. Anything. And when it comes down to it, Donald Trump threatens that for Republican members of Congress, and they'll do anything to appease him and turn their back on their constituents. That's just what's happening here.
What is it going to take now for Congress to find its voice, but really the authority given to it by the Constitution, and require justification from the president, or pass an AUMF? And on this note, this is a bipartisan problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the surrendering of war-making powers to the executive
Right,
goes
right.
back a long ways,
That's
and
right.
it's bipartisan.
Yeah.
But you're leading an effort now to try to begin to exert some congressional authority and oversight. Where is that effort?
Yeah, yeah. This you're absolutely right, Ken. I mean, this has been happening for decades, right? The giving away of congressional power. Like we are, I think, at a point in our nation's history where the powers of the presidency are at an all-time high and the powers of Congress are at an all-time low. And that happened because Congress ceded it. Congress allowed that to happen. On tariffs, on treaties and alliances, on foreign policy, on immigration matters, and certainly on war powers is one of the more acute examples right now. So I'm somebody that believes, having done 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I know you served too, having seen us spend $3 trillion, 7,000 of our brothers and sisters' lives, tens of thousands of our brothers and sisters that bear the invisible scars and the visible scars of those battles, lost credibility, and it ended very poorly. Iraq and Afghanistan, certainly. And we're still doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm pretty angry about that. And everybody should be angry about that, actually. The lost blood and treasure and opportunity. And the fact also that burden was not shared equally. It was shared by the working class primarily, and the elites, didn't bear that burden. They never do, right, in these situations. So I'm upset about it. It's one of the biggest reasons I came to Congress, and I'm going to do everything possible to fix it.
That was part 1 of my conversation with Jason Crow. Check out part 2 tomorrow, where we discuss what Congress must do to rein in Trump's abuse of his war-making powers and what average citizens can do to hold DHS and ICE accountable for their abuses of power. See you then.